Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on setting boundaries. Just waiting for the numbers to come in. Apparently we had over 300 people registered for this webinar, so it's obviously a topic that people are really interested in. Everyone keep, there's no camera and audio, so everyone's going to have their camera and audio off. It's in Demio, which is the platform that we're in. It's more of a one-way presentation. Yes, please say hi. I'm assuming that you can hear me. So just get into the habit of saying hi, putting something in the chat. It's like a muscle that the more you use it, the easier it gets. Yay! Hi everyone. I'm so great to see you all here. Okay, so the numbers are slowing down, or they're not actually, but we're going to get going anyway. Okay, so my buttons work. So I would like to acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr peoples, which are the peoples upon which country I'm currently sitting, and acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of these lands upon which I'm meeting you today, which I live, love, work and play, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and a warm welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are present here today. And I'll also acknowledge that I didn't get a chance to do it today, but the flag, apparently, the Aboriginal flag is now available to be used. I haven't checked it out with my Indigenous friends, but I'm wondering whether it's actually okay now to have the Aboriginal flag when I do a welcome to country. So that's something I'll be looking to implement going forwards. Maybe someone knows. So I'm Nigel. I'm a psychological coach. More specifically, I'm a psychotherapist, a counsellor, couples therapist, a trainer, a teacher, an academic teacher. I teach people how to do counselling and be counsellors, and psychologists. And boundaries are huge in therapy training. It's something that we're taught, and is a big emphasis. My personal story around boundaries is that I was on my university placement, and the building wasn't always available when I wanted it to be and when I needed it to be, and I'd make arrangements with clients, then I'd turn up and the doors were locked and I couldn't get in, and so I'd go and I'd say, let's just go and sit on a bench in the park. Actually, there was a church and a cemetery across the road. Let's go sit over there and have a chat. And so we sit over there and have a chat, and I was happy and the client was happy, but my clinical supervisor was very disappointed in my attitude towards boundaries, and actually terminated my placement based upon a learning need around boundaries. And I'm going, what is this all about? What's your problem? So that prompted me to then do my master's thesis on psychotherapists' experience of boundaries. So I went from someone who had a learning need to someone who's got quite a significant depth of expertise in what boundaries are, how they work, and what they mean. And what they mean specifically to therapists who are so tuned into relational boundaries. And we'll get into some of that today. What I'm interested in hearing from you is your interest. What's your interest in the topic of boundaries? What's your interest in the topic of boundary setting? And what's the specific or general situations that you're thinking about, concerned about, curious about? And as we go along, as we talk about it, you'll get a better sense of what it is that you want to know. So I'm really interested in you telling me what you want to know. There won't be a lot of back and forth between us. I'm not going to often I sort of ask questions and get answers and use audience feedback, but I've got a lot of content to cover. So as you think of something, pop it in the chat. I will definitely see it because it pops up in front of me, and I'll respond as best as I can as we're going along. Okay, so overview. We're going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries everywhere. Understanding boundaries. What is this boundaries thing? What are we talking about? And then we'll focus in on the setting boundaries part, how that works. Boundaries with friends at work, boundaries at work, how to set boundaries so I don't feel overwhelmed. So setting limits. So boundaries are everywhere. Sort of the consequence of the sort of the deep dive into what are these boundaries, things that people, it's an experience, and boundaries, something that we feel, something that we come across in our daily life, and sort of opens up this whole whole window of how humans perceive the world. And I'm sort of looking around me, and I'll get you to look around you as well and realize that everything you perceive through its boundary. I've got my water bottle, and I can't see what's in the water bottle. All I can perceive is the boundary of the water bottle, and all I can be aware of is the way that the boundary of the water bottle appears to my visual senses. I've got a cup of tea, and similarly, you can't see the cup of tea. You can say, oh, he's got some orange tags there. What's he got in there? So, but there's a boundary that sort of stops you from seeing in, but is enough to go, okay, there's a visual impression of something that looks like a cup, and your brain then goes into this interpretive process. Oh, it's a cup. And for me, I've got a visual kind of, it's a cup, but then when I touch it, it's hot. Whereas the water bottle, when I touch the boundary of the water bottle, it's cold. So I do get a different sensory experience of those two boundaries. I was actually a lawyer in my first career, and one way of thinking about the law is that it's all about boundaries. Writing contracts, quite good at writing contracts, and I was quite good at writing contracts before I had my placement cancelled for not having an understanding of boundaries. And contracts are all about boundaries, about getting really clear on what the limits are, what's okay, what's not okay, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, what's where you can go, where you can't go. And as we go through, you'll get a sense of how boundaries are absolutely everywhere. And what we're going to tune into is how we become aware of boundaries as human beings when they're not obvious. And we'll talk about some of the obvious ones, like you look at a rugby pitch or a football pitch, and or any kind of sports pitch, and it's got a clear boundary. A basketball court, they've got a boundary line, and that sort of creates the limit of that game space. So it's a really clear boundary. I often use, I'm actually looking I can look out my window, I can see the fence line, and I've got a very clear sense that there's a fence line, and I've got my side of the boundary, I've got the other person's side of the boundary. And that's we kind of make that easy for ourselves when we have things like fence lines, when we have boundary lines drawn. But when it comes to interpersonal relationships, the same basic principle applies, but we haven't always got clear visual or sensory, physical cues to tell us there's a boundary there or not. But they're there in all of our relationships. When you look at the literature around boundaries, you hear that boundaries, but particularly in terms of interpersonal boundaries, can be thick. You can be a very thick boundary person, and there was an approach that started to sort of, there's part of psychology that loves to categorize. There's you've got this diagnosis, that diagnosis, you're on this side of that spectrum, you're on that side of that spectrum, you've got this kind of personality. If anyone's done a Myers-Briggs type indicator, MBTI test, you kind of got you're all the EG, EJ, T, IBs. Where do you fit into the category? And that's all kind of about splitting people up into boundaries. So some people can be thick boundary people, and they are very firm about their boundaries. Nobody can get in, nobody can get out, but they can also be very constrained. You can be very safe within your boundaries when you've got thick boundaries. You're very clear about what goes on between you and other people, but you can also become quite restricted and unable to do things spontaneously. Whereas a thin boundary person is kind of imagine the wafy kind of hippie who just sort of floats in and out of relationships, and anything goes, and everything's okay, and it's just all about freedom, baby, yeah, whatever. And yet they can get themselves, and they can have a really lovely spontaneous experience of freedom, but then they can find themselves being taken advantage of by other people who see the thinness of their boundaries as an opportunity to sort of take advantage of that person's willingness to do and try anything at any time. So boundaries can be firm in that, like the bottle, you're up against it, that's a pretty firm boundary, or they can be much more flexible. So my shirt provides a boundary. You can't really see it, but it moves. It moves. So it's a very flexible boundary, and air can pass through it. They can be quite permeable. Or boundaries are also talked about, particularly in terms of psychology and relationships, and in particular parenting. Boundaries can be talked about as being secure boundaries, like they feel safe. You can imagine going to a gate and you shake the gate, and the gate won't open, or you go to a door and you try and get through the door and the door's locked, and that's a kind of a metaphor for a really secure boundary. And then boundaries can be insecure, where you can kind of feel like there's a boundary around you, but you kind of push it, and it's like pushing on a wobbly gate or pushing on a wobbly door. I mean, I used to work in a kids' prison, and so many of the kids had this terrible habit of, if they saw one of those doors with round knobs that you lock with a key, or that you lock with a snip on the inside, and they knew that if you shook that handle and rattled the door, then the door, you know, 1 time out of 10 or 1 time out of 20 would open. So every door, they a metaphor for an insecure boundary, a boundary that's there, but it's not actually safe. I love the extremes of boundaries, you know, on one end, and how we can respond to those extremes. On one end, we have kind of a boundarylessness. You know, so the girl on the beach looking out to sea, she's permeable, she's seeing herself in the distance. You know, it's got a real sense of freedom and possibility, and being able to sort of, you know, go anywhere. And that there's kind of an awe, you know, when we look up to the stars and we see the massive expanse of space, we have this sense of, oh wow, that's so amazing. But at the same time, that can also be terrifying. You know, the darkness of outer space, the unknowns of what might be out there. Yeah, the ocean, wow, look, it's big and free, but you don't know what's in it, and you don't know what's going to happen. If you got into a boat and actually started heading straight out into the ocean, what's going to happen? You don't know. It's terrifying. Similarly, with having very, very firm, solid, secure boundaries around us, and I've got a baby there. The example is of a baby. If you pick up a baby and it doesn't feel safe and secure, it'll wave its arms around, and then it'll get a little bit distressed because it doesn't feel safe. So when you hold a baby, you know, you learn to hold a baby in your arms, so that not too tight, not too loose, but so the baby feels safe and secure. But if I was to do that to you today as an adult and go, oh, come here, I'm going to hold you tight. And you don't know who I am. I'm just some complete stranger. And I come and go, I'm just going to hold you tight. Do you feel nice and safe and secure? You go, no, I feel constrained. I feel controlled. I feel like I'm, you know, I want to break free. I hate this. And so, you know, there's no good or extreme. We can love it or we can hate it, depending upon the meaning that we make of it. So I'm just looking at what people want: boundaries with work, friends, laws, wife, self-care, when to say no, parents and partner, healthy boundaries with saying not come across inflexible or stubborn, deal with loved ones. More subjectives, focus on relationships, less clinical, more family sensitive. A new line that we cross, so how much is the situation specific? Yana, who's agreeing with everyone's agreeing with Yana, can't see where that is. What methods do you use to tackle and enforce personal boundaries in a social professional setting to avoid leaving the person feeling disappointed? Boundaries between work and home. Some are still working from home. They're important. Boundaries with friends who do not respect boundaries. Professional boundaries. Yeah, professional boundaries. Okay. Yeah. How to maintain healthy boundaries, saying to not come across as inflexible. Okay. So the next bit of the puzzle, if you like, of boundaries is this kind of curious thing that I think started to probably emerge already in what I've talked about. And that's the reality that it's a fact, you know, that as human beings, we tend to be happiest when we feel free from boundaries, but we only feel this happiness or joy or sense of freedom when we're contained within otherwise quite secure boundaries. If those outer boundaries we discover aren't secure, then we tend to feel a sense of anxiety and agitation. So the examples I've used are a football pitch, a basketball court. If suddenly, and if you've ever played sport, and you know the referee's in charge of the boundaries, and then someone puts a foot out of touch, or tennis, and the ball goes over the line, and you're like, well, that was out, and the umpire goes, no, it wasn't. You know, the feeling that rises up in you of, hang on a second, we're not playing by the rules here. This isn't safe. You know, I thought I could feel secure in how this was going to be played, but we're not playing that way. And the feeling that rises up in you can be very, very strong. And it's those feelings about boundaries that are most kind of important when thinking about boundaries. Other great example is kids. Put a baby just, on the floor, open doors of a house, the baby will roam, but the baby is going to grow up feeling quite anxious. Babies and kids actually feel best when they're in a contained, safe space. Like, you put them in a daycare or a kinder, the kid who's feeling upset and distressed, you put them in a bed and you close it off so they feel like they're in a more of a cocooned space. We want to feel free, but we want to feel free within those boundaries. Take that to the workplace, take that to family life, take that to parenting. When I'm in the workplace, hang on a second, I like to know the rules. I like to know what's expected of me. I like to know what the policies and procedures are. And I like to know that people are following those policies and procedures. And if they don't, that there's going to be consequences that we all know about that they're going to follow through. Once I've got the rules, I'm a rugby player. So once the rules are secure, once I'm confident in the umpire referee, then like I can come alive on the football pitch. I can play within the rules, and I can find my creativity, and I can find my juice, and I can try and figure out how best to be within that space. Same within the workplace, same within the family, even same within your friendship group. Yeah, once I know the rules of engagement and I stay within those rules of engagement and know that as long as I stay within the rules of engagement, there shouldn't be any inadvertent consequences or unexpected consequences, then I feel free and I feel confident and I can come alive. So what exactly are boundaries? How do we create them in an interpersonal sense? How do we maintain them? How do we relate to them? So this is the big kind of epiphany, if you like, from my research, from my experience, and for you guys today. This is like the big aha moment. Boundaries are expectations. So if you want to set boundaries, you've got to get clear on your expectations. And I'm going to drill down now into more detail about what that looks like. So every situation you've talked about, have a think about expectations. And it's always about me and the other person. What are my expectations? What about the other person's expectations? So we've got these expectations, and quite literally, my expectation creates a boundary. The other person's expectation creates a boundary for them. But this is the but. Yeah, you and me, them, we only become aware of the boundary, the expectation, when it's either threatened or it's crossed. And we're going to go on to talk a little bit about how do you become more, the clearer you are on your expectations, the more aware you will be when your boundary is threatened. Because it's almost as if once your boundary is crossed, sometimes it's a little bit too late. And certainly the physiological response is very different. Sometimes the example is used of a house. And so you've got a house, and we talked about the house with the broken gate, and the front door lock is broken. Someone's been smashed, no one's fixed it. And so this is a house that people can just come and go from. Doesn't feel very safe. People are coming in and out. Anyone can do anything in this house of yours. Or you've got the house that's the other end of extreme. You've got a big fence, you've got a secure gate, you've got barbed wire, it's an electric fence, you've got alarms and video and cameras, you've got a long drive or walkway up to the front door. The door is got 3 locks on it. The windows are all barred, and it's all very, very secure. The first house, you're not going to know if someone's coming in and out. But the second house, you're going to know that someone's outside thinking about trying to get in. And that metaphor is really helpful in terms of thinking about how you manage your expectations in relationship. What kind of house do you want? Yeah, what kind of house of self, of you do you want? Do you want a house that people can just come and go from? Or do you want a house that, you can be aware of when people are planning to come and planning to go? Also, on the other side of it, other people, they don't know about your boundaries until after they've crossed them and you've let them know about it. So a lot of the time, the issues that you have in relationships are because, first of all, you're not aware that someone's crossing your boundary until it's too late. They've already crossed it. And then you don't say anything about it because there's a power imbalance. You fear social rejection. You fear loss of opportunity. You've got some reason why you don't feel like you should or could actually say to that person, whoa, you've crossed a boundary here. I need you to move out of it. So how do you clarify those boundaries? And it's dependent on a few factors. Yeah, first of all, what is the context? Yeah, what's the situation in? And as you think about it, so here we are, we're in a online webinar, and this is our context. And we've got some rules, I talk to you, you put some comments in the chat to me, you might have some certain expectations about what people do or don't and should or shouldn't put into the chat. I've set the expectation that I'm inviting you to write commentary, to write some commentary and some questions about what you're interested in. So that's then contextual in terms of what your role is in relation to the other people in this specific context. My role is to talk and to inform and to engage and hopefully leave you with something important that you can take away. Your role is to be open and open to the information, to ask some questions, to focus on what it is that you want to take from this. So our roles are different, and this is the case for every circumstance that we're in. When you're at work, the context is your workplace, and then the social, legal, and, as Dylan has pointed out, the cultural framework within which your workplace is situated. And then you've got the specific relationships that you have with the individuals within your workspace. You've got the people that do the same role as you, and so your colleagues within that role. Then you've got the people who manage you, and so are in a kind of a position of authority in relation to you. And then you've got the people that report to you. And then you might have external customers. And so your question is always, what's my role in relation to each of these individuals within this context? And once I'm clear on my role, what's my role, then it's like, okay, so what are my expectations of myself within this role? What do I expect of me? And what do other people expect of me in this role? And then what do I expect of other people in the context of their role and their relationship with me? And when you think about this, there's a process that I sort of run people through in workshops where we break it down and we sort of say, okay, so what's your expectation of yourself in the role? What's your expectation of that person in that role? And then you ask the other person, what's your expectation of yourself in this role? And what's your expectation of the other person in the role? And very quickly, you start to see these friction points. And it's like, well, no wonder you've been pissing me off, because you're expecting this from me, but I'm expecting something else from me. And you're expecting this from yourself, but I'm expecting something different from myself. And you can apply that to all situations, family, friendships, workplaces. And you can go through that process for yourself. Okay, so generally the goal in our relationships is to have clear and consistent boundaries. If you want to feel safe and secure and confident and free in your life and in your relationships, you want to set clear and consistent boundaries, and you want clear and consistent boundaries from other people. If you want your children, your work colleagues, your employees to feel safe and confident and free in their work environment, then you want to be able to set clear and consistent boundaries. People feel safe, comfortable, and trusting when they know what to expect in response to their own behaviors. So if someone knows, oh, if I do this, then this is what's going to be the response from the other person. If I do that, that's going to be a response from the other. I know what you expect from me. So I've got a choice. I either comply or I don't comply. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So people have sort of been asking, well, how do you set clear and consistent boundaries? And it's the same across all environments. And I'm work, family, friends, and people ask specifically about professional relationships. And be clear. And the ways to be clear and set boundaries and talk about your expectations is simply to talk about what I want from you, what I need from you, what I expect from you. Yeah. And then you can put that more directively and depending upon your context. And often you'll see this kind of language more in kind of written policy. And it's that you could do it using a spreadsheet, or you could do it doing this way. You should do it using a spreadsheet. You must do it using a spreadsheet. You should inform this person that this action is taking place. You must inform this person that this action is taking place, or you could inform this person that's actually taking place. And then you want clear and consistent consequences. I just wrote last night a policy for an organisation that I'm sort of helping with the governance of. And I was thinking, oh, I'm writing this policy, but I was aware that I wasn't really setting clear and consistent consequences. And even now talking, I'm like, yeah, the rules were there, but the consequences aren't there. And that's the otherwise. If you don't, then this is what will happen. If you choose to do it differently, if you choose to not respect these expectations, this is what you can expect to happen. And of course, you then need to follow through with these expectations. And this is, whether I'm talking about a professional, a working place, or a family in particular, this is what this is what I'd be saying to people. And people are interested in the social networks as well, and friendships, and it's the same thing. And often we're scared. Often people can say, I want this, I need this. Some people can't, and that's important for them to learn. But then sometimes we say, well, I need you to do this, and the person doesn't. And we're scared of losing the relationship. We're scared of their rejection a lot of the time. We're scared that they won't like us. So we don't follow through with the consequence. And then they quite naturally form the impression that what they're doing is okay. That, that expectation that you might have mentioned at some stage, or at some stage, you weren't really clear about it, but you kind of suggested maybe. They're like, well, it's not really real. You don't really care that much that I touch you in a way that I like touching you, because you haven't made it clear to me that you don't like me touching you in a way that I'm touching you. So mutual respect comes down to what's often called constructive communication or non-violent communication, and you can do some websites, some good websites where they have long lists of ways, at work, at home, parenting, to sort of enforce boundaries. But this way is a kind of a nice generic way that a lot of you, if you've done any kind of communications training, you would have come across. And it's where you say, when you walk through my boundary, when you come in my gate, I feel like I'm not being respected. And I would be grateful if you would stand at the fence and let me know that you want to come in before you come in. And the other person will respond to that in whatever way that they respond to it. But at this stage, we're asking, well, how do you assert boundaries in a respectful way? And it's when I observe your behavior that has brought up a feeling in me, I feel, and then I am honest and authentic about that feeling that it brings up in me, and then we make a request. I would like it if you would. And we do this repeatedly. You should never get tired of this approach. When those boundaries aren't respected, when you've been respectful, when you've said, please don't come in, please don't force yourself upon me, please don't do that thing that's not part of your role, then we have some other options that we need to resort to. And these options are just like, this is just kind of facts. This is just kind of facts. One, you can avoid and escape. And this is a good option. Often when I'm thinking about asserting boundaries, I'm thinking of, and it's a bit sad, but thinking of women in public places. And and the first thing is, of course, is to sort of be clear about your boundaries and what you expect from other people, usually men, in those spaces. And then to go, okay, well, I'm not going to tolerate it. And then you've got your radar, you've got your kind of your big fence with your video cameras, and you're like, oh, I can see that someone's planning to invade my personal space and do something to me, or to me, not with me, but to me, that I don't want them to do. And so I'm going to sort of retreat. I'm going to move my boundary. I'm going to get out of here. And if it keeps on coming, I'm just out. I'm gone. I'm in the taxi and I've gone home. Same basic principle in the workplace, in the home, in the family. If it's not working, just pull away. That doesn't always work. Sometimes we can't pull away, or we don't want to pull away, in which case we need to be willing to escalate. Yeah, we actually need to, and this is where people go, whoa, conflict, stop it. And it's like, yeah, you have trouble with boundaries because you're averse to conflict. Yeah, it's because you don't like that discomfort of being in conflict with another person, but they don't care. Some people love it. They're just like, yeah, bring it on. I've got a brother-in-law. He's like, yeah, whatever to you. I loves conflict. And so he will get into a debate, into an argument about absolutely everything, and he won't pick up that the other people are going, we don't want to have this conversation anymore. We're done. But actually, you need to be willing to go, okay, no, I'm done with this conversation. I don't want to do this anymore. This guy here, get out of my space. I'm not okay. Yeah, and I will stand here and I I will be strong in myself. Okay, I've got to move on. It's 1 o'clock. The third one is how our society works. If someone invades your boundaries, if someone breaks a law that's in relation to you, then you invite a higher authority to intervene. In the family, it's the parents. In the work, sometimes it's the big brother or the big sister. In the workplace, it's the manager, the boss, and you just keep on going. And if the boss won't sort it out, then you kind of appeal to the courts. If it's something to do with a breaking of the law, we go to the police and we engage the police, and the police have that higher authority supported by the laws of the country to then intervene and do what needs to be done. So the key takeaways. Hopefully that's enough for everyone. Hopefully I've said enough for people. The professional stuff is around. So I spend when I meet someone in a professional context, counseling, coaching, supervision, all I talk about is expectations. And I can't talk about their expectations so much. I can talk about this is what you can expect from me. I started two new supervision groups yesterday with new counselors, and we just spent the full 2 hours. These are the expectations. This is what you need to do in order to comply with the legal requirements, to comply with educational requirements, and to be a part of this group. So setting up and being very clear about expectations up front saves so much trouble down the track. So be clear about what you expect from other people and about what they can expect from you. Be alert to possible boundary crossings and consistent in the way you respond. Speak up early. Yeah, and it's a feeling, and it's the more sensitive you become to the feelings. And as you think about it now, I'm sure a lot of you are going, yeah, I know, I felt that coming, but I've learned from childhood to go, oh, ignore that. Maybe they didn't mean it. And maybe it's the wrong, maybe I shouldn't say anything. And maybe I'm just going to cause a fuss and I shouldn't cause a fuss. Say something early. Notice it early. Speak up. Don't tolerate people who repeatedly disrespect the boundaries that you set. Put the link in for the feedback if you can, Teresa. But don't tolerate people who repeatedly disrespect the boundaries you have set. Walk away from them. Be willing to forego the relationship. Like the person who's willing to not have the relationship rather than feel abused in the relationship is the person who has the power in the relationship. Call upon higher authorities if you need to, and if you've set consequences, or if you need to follow through with consequences, follow through with those consequences. Walk away. If you've said to the kid, I'm going to take your screen away, take it away. If you be clear about what you're going to do and then follow through, that's parenting. So you've got to go. You need to, sometimes. So Rayan, that's about being willing to walk away. So being willing to walk away gives you the power. So whether or not they're willing to have the higher authority intervene, then that's you need to make that happen. People labelled as being too emotional. Well, no. Don't be emotional. You're being clear about your boundaries, and so what if someone calls you emotional? They're trying to control you. They're trying to, people will throw shit at you because they would rather just do what the hell they want with you rather than have to respect your boundaries. So let them call you whatever you want, whatever they want. It's okay to say no to those related to us. Walk away from them. It's frustrating when we are called that way. Sorry, I couldn't join. What about dealing with immaturity? Do you bend? No, you don't bend. You don't bend. You can be flexible. I'll roll with a lot of stuff, particularly with client work. But as soon as my boundaries get threatened as an individual, as a professional, I've got clear boundaries around where you can go and where you can't go, and don't come into my family. My family is sacrosanct, and don't even ask me about it. And if you ask me about it, I'll say, oh, that's not, that's something we really talk about. Here, this therapy is about you, so I will clarify the expectations. Yeah. So guilt is a way of being controlled. Guilt is a means of getting you to cede your boundaries to someone else. So don't let emotions like guilt, convince you that you should just let someone take advantage of you because you feel guilty if you don't. Guilt's dangerous. Guilt is a very, very dangerous emotion. Very potential. It's got a purpose, but it's potentially very, very unhelpful. And a lot of us have grown up in cultures of guilt, particularly through through religious education. So just be wary of the kind of guilt you've grown up with, and really challenge whether or not your guilt means that you therefore should let other people have things that actually you're not comfortable with them having. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks for your time. Gone over a few minutes. Hope it's been helpful. See you next time.